This is absolutely Essendon. It's our Media Watch edition where we take a look at any news that is circulating from Bomberland or around Bomberland. And boy, has there been some news since our loss on the weekend against the Adelaide Crows. So we're going to have a look at, well, you know what, we haven't got time to cover everything, but we're just going to take a look at a few different points of view to see what we can learn from that. And I think the first one, getting stuck straight into it. Do you mind if we get stuck straight in?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Let's dive in.
I'm dying to hear.
On the ESPN website, maybe do you want to talk about that?
Happy to do that. Look, maybe just quickly to say, obviously the news world, the media was very heavily focused on the Bombers throughout the course of the week, straight after the Adelaide game. Of course, a lot of questions being asked about where is this football club at in its development, in its premiership window. And quite a few pundits had some interesting points of view, none of them good, about where this club is. And one in particular that caught my eye was on ESPN, on their online website, with Rowan Connolly, well-known journalist and Essendon fanatic. And Rowan had some pretty damning words to say about, what's been going on at Essendon over the last 20-odd years. Let's have a look at this clip.
But the culture is weak. The standards are weak. And I think this group running the club now is aware of that and is doing everything in its power to change it. But the neglect has been so profound for so long now, and we're talking about almost 25 years.
All right. Well, yes. He's not mincing words, and that was just a short clip from a longer interview with Rowan, and I can tell you, if you've watched the whole interview, you'll know he was pretty scathing of the culture at the club and where it's been going over a long time. So, an interesting take from him. What were your thoughts on that? Yeah,
look, it's nothing that we haven't been talking about for some time. I think you described it as worse than purgatory, and it certainly feels that way. His point is basically that it is just, we're still paying the price for poor decisions from years ago. And I think it's like that boiling frog analogy, you just don't notice at the time until all of a sudden
he's cooked.
Yes, and
much like our football club,
and we certainly seem to be. And the problem is, I think that, and we've said this before as well a couple of times, is that you just don't notice because we get to play in all the marquee games like Anzac Day, which is has a grand final-esque atmosphere. You've got the Dreamtime game. Now you've got that King's Eve game that's a big event, and so we never feel like we're bottoming out. We always feel like we're in it. We're part of the action.
We always feel we're relevant.
And that,
we're not.
Yeah, and that's I think an issue. You know what I mean? Because the players still feel like they're on the big stage.
I think a lot of the recruiting spiel, pitch, whatever you want to call it, to prospective players has always been, well, come to Essendon and play in these big games. But what they fail to mention is it won't include finals. It will just be those sort of marquee games in the home and away fixtures. Yeah. And it really does give you a false sense of importance. And frankly speaking, when you talk to people in the footy world, fans of the game, Essendon is so irrelevant now. And we've passed being a laughing stock. Yeah. I mean, we were that back during the supplement saga. Yeah. We've now just become basically irrelevant, and that's really sad for a club with such a grand and majestic history. Yes. But moving right along,
yes.
I mean, and on that theme, a lot of the talk was around, is Essendon finally coming to terms with where it is? Yeah. And are we rebuilding? Is this a reset or a rebuild? And I think Jared Waitley had some comments on that.
He did. And because, of course, everyone is acutely aware that as Essendon supporters, long-suffering, that's kind of like the last thing we want to hear, because we feel like that should have already happened maybe 4 or 5 times over the last 23, 25 years. And so definitely not music to our ears. But Waitley on SEN said Essendon is in rebuild. I hadn't fully appreciated the signs until Saturday at the MCG. Jettison senior players, resist any thought of free agents, amass a cachet of draft picks, debut the young talent, deploy the inexperienced prospects in the key on-field roles. It marries up with the It marries up with a 3-year plan initiated by the new list manager Matt Rosa in October. Its thesis: the talent deficit at the Bombers can only be addressed through the draft, and that's a slow and painful process.
Right, so I think this is really interesting, and I know Brad Scott was on AFL 360 and the panel put that question to Brad. He was not, definitive about whether it's a rebuild. He's being a little bit vague, and he actually talked about the club's messaging on these types of things. But there's really no doubt in my mind that internally, at least, they've already made that decision. Over the last 2 seasons, the club's delisted about 50% of the playing list, and the way in which Stringer departed the club, I think, is very indicative of our views. He was never going to be a part of the future, and they've gone to the draft. We're not even considering trading in, experienced players. So I think there's no doubt that there's a rebuild happening in front of us right now, and that also then supports the thinking behind Brad Scott's extension. I look at it, and I'd like your thoughts on this, that we've just begun. His tenure at Essendon, in fact, has just begun. And the last 2 years, wipe that from the hard drive, and the rebuild has started. And Scott's got 3 years now, and Matt Rosa, as the recruitment manager, has 3 years to get this football club back on an even keel. Yeah. What do you think about it?
It makes me sick to the stomach, but I think that's why I think the club has sort of tiptoed around it, because they don't want to come out and say it, because
But why can't you say it?
Because they have relied on the cash flow of their members for all these years, when we thought things were being fixed up, from 2017, 2019, 2022. And all the while, members just keep paying up the cash, and they're living off that largesse. And I think that's why, because it's going to piss a lot of people off, as they should be.
If you don't mind me saying, it sounds a little bit like a conspiracy theory, that they've deliberately kept the club at that point of promise just to keep the membership income, that point of hope. So you're saying if David Burham came out and said in a press conference today or tomorrow, whenever, this football club is now going into a full rebuild. No one's role is safe. No player's position is guaranteed, apart from perhaps a handful. And we're going to be reviewing every player and their performance standards closely at the end of this season. And if they're not up to standard, they've gone. Do you think if he said that, the membership base or the fan base is going to complain?
Especially if he ends it with this sentence: and do not expect much over the next 5 to 7 years.
Right. Well,
I think people will lose their shit after having watched Collingwood go up and down, the Hawks go up and... Hey, look, we've said this all before. I just feel like we're just
but they went
ourselves.
Up and down because they did a rebuild. And Hawthorn famously threw out players like Luke Hodge, Jago O'Meara. They were pretty brutal, to be honest, and now they're reaping the benefits. So, but I guess the truth is it took them 3 or 4 years, right? Yeah. We're at the beginning of that process. So, and on that point, also on AFL 360, Zach Merritt bravely fronted the panel straight after that Adelaide game, and he was asked the question about whether he, maybe signed his extension. It's pretty much a one-club player. He'll be at Essendon pretty much forever. Did he realise at the time that the club was going to be going through this kind of rebuild? And let's have a look at what Zach had to say.
The long term. So you recommitted to the club over the long term with the vision. So is the vision different now? Is the future prospect different now, with senior players being jettisoned, free agents overlooked, cachet of draft picks, young players being debuted, key players on? This is a rebuild. Did you anticipate this is where you were going to be?
It's probably, I haven't got time to discuss the whole question. I think, I was very aware of our list in 21 when I recommitted for 6 years. I did hours and hours of work behind the scenes. I've a love for footy. I went away with my manager, with a couple of close friends of mine in the industry, and mapped out every list at that period of time. And ironically, the best 3 lists at that time have won the last 3 premierships. So I think we're pretty accurate. I was understanding of where we're at. It hasn't probably worked out exactly how I thought it would pan out, but being the youngest team at the moment, the guys coming in are debutants, so it's not like we're holding guys out, or the senior players or age above 27 just aren't there to come in at the moment, but we have a lot of guys 22 to 26. So I think Dacos and Sheasel and these guys that come in week 1 and are the best players, it doesn't always correlate, I think, for some of this younger talent. No doubt we want these guys to come on and quicker and as fast as they can, but I think the talent is there. It's just how fast we can develop them and turn them into good quality players that perform and are capable week in, week out.
Okay.
Yeah. First of all, good on him for fronting up. Hard question to answer.
Look, he was
such a hard
he was
question.
diplomatic.
Yeah.
I thought he was. He didn't. He's not going to throw the club under the bus. But I mean, all credit to Zach. He's an absolute champion of the football club, and I think it's clear that he's dedicated to the club. He wants to see the club successful, and he wants to be leading it across the line in that regards. Is that how you saw it?
Yeah, I think he's just fully committed. I mean, I think he really genuinely bleeds red and black, and you read all this stuff about just the work that he puts in off the field, and like all the comments that we had in our last episode, everyone just feels for the guy because he's obviously just putting in the work, laser focused, and all the acts that he does on the field that, don't generate disposal stats, but just applies that sort of defensive pressure that, has been lacking, not just just all over the field. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that Zach said that, he'd studied every list, every other club list to sort of understand where, they were in comparison to his own team. And he picked the last three premiers based on his analysis of their list. So, he's a smart guy. He studies the game. He even calls himself a football head. He watches a lot of football. Maybe the rest of that side needs to sit around at Zach's house and watch a bit of footy with him.
I think there was an Anzac Day game maybe 2 years ago, and part of the sort of the build up to the game was an interview with him and Nathan Buckley, and they talked about how he reached out to Nathan Buckley about 6 years ago, and wanted to have coffee with him to sort of see what he could learn about how to improve his game. This is the sort of stuff that this guy.
He's a perfectionist.
And
to think that he was removed from the leadership group a few years ago because his standards were too high. He was too demanding of his teammates.
Yeah.
I mean, that says a hell of a lot about this football club.
Yeah.
And so Brad Scott, he had his press conference, the pre-Port Adelaide game press conference.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm jumping the gun. My apologies. Before we move on to that, but just back to the position of the football club and where, is it a rebuild? Is it not a rebuild? A club champion legend James Hird,
favourite son,
was on the Eddie and Jimmy podcast, and he had his views on our performance against the Crows and what he felt or where he felt the club was at the moment. Let's have a look at what the great James Hird had to say.
And I think the disappointing thing for Essendon fans who are in the crowd was just where was the defence? Where was the ball going the forward line and bounce straight back out and they'd kick a goal against an Adelaide team which is a good team, but they're not a great team. I mean, if the Brisbane Lions had have smacked them or GWS had have smacked them, or maybe. But I think for Essendon supporters, it's all right. Where are we? Are we a rebuilding club? Are we a in progress club? And I feel like and obviously this will. I just feel like the club has conditioned the supporters to be okay. We're going all the way down the bottom, and we'll start there. Which I'm not sure how that will how the supporters will feel about that.
Yeah. Well, there you go. That's also quite sobering to listen to, especially what he said about sort of Adelaide, maybe just being not an amazing side, just an okay side, and that's what they did to us. What is in store when we face the real premiership contenders? Not to say that they won't be Adelaide fans, but or potentially could be, but that was a good point.
Yeah, I mean it's true. It's like Adelaide are kind of at the early stages of their own sort of rise up the ladder. It's not like they're already there. So for them to have inflicted such pain against us, it sort of does make you think, how are we going to hold up against Brisbane or GWS come the time in this season. And so following on to that and what I was just about to talk about earlier, and I'm going to pass this back to you, Brad Scott, he was a little bit shy in the press conference post the Adelaide game. He seemed a little bit tetchy when asked some questions and didn't feel in the mood to necessarily answer those questions. His attitude changed somewhat in his pre-Port Adelaide press conference.
Yes, so that was a Monday press conference, and he also went on to appear on AFL 360 that evening, and he had the likes of Gary Lyon just sort of saying, hey, I'm only just asking what Essendon fans would want to know, and I think that was about why hasn't the side improved defensively at all. In his time, what's holding back? And look, in general, I mean, obviously we went on about his performance in the post-game presser. He was a bit more tempered in his approach, and I get the feeling that the powers that be maybe just tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Buddy, you might just want to tweak your approach just a little bit. That didn't play that well with the masses."
Yeah.
We need to keep that membership cash flow happening.
Well, I mean, I think he was definitely a bit more candid and realistic about where we're at, and certainly expressed his disappointment at how the team performed. And we've got a little clip here, which we've got from this press conference. Have a quick look at this.
And the effort and intent is something that we base our game around, and it was lacking, which was the most, disappointing thing for me throughout the day.
What was the reason for it, Brad? Were the players given, or have you given, and how did they turn around?
Yeah, just sitting on the back foot and hoping we'd win contests instead of getting across to support the contest.
Right, so there you go. I mean, that was a much different Brad Scott to the one that was post-game. Now, I get post-game, it's right in the heat of the moment.
Yeah.
He's had a few days to kind of sit back and think about things. But I agree. I reckon someone's told him, look, we've got to be a bit more transparent to the fans. We can't be this secretive, almost cult-like organisation where it's all sort of, sneaking around the back corridors of the hangar and don't let anybody know what's going on. I think the fans are ready to hear the truth about where we're at as a football club, and having a clear plan, and we can buy into that plan. No one's expecting us to win the premiership this year. So for the love of God, just come out and tell us how it is and let us understand what you're doing about it. That's, I think, critical, right?
So they've finally decided to run with the honesty approach.
They have to. They can't keep pretending. This
something
club,
different. Let's try something different.
I mean, the culture of sort of mystery at this football club over so many years is just not acceptable anymore, and I think the fans deserve a little more respect, certainly given the fact that we're putting quite a few $1 million in the coffers every year with memberships and so on and so forth. And, David Barham and Andrew Welsh and Brad Scott, you guys have got to come out and be open with us, the fans, the people that pay the salaries. So thank you for at least doing that in this most recent press conference.
That's a positive step. Okay, so let's look forward now to there was Zero Hanger covered the injuries to Sartis and Perkins, so they're out of this game against Port Adelaide. I think Sartis actually injured himself in the warm-up, did something to his finger, his metatarsal, is that what you call it?
Yeah, a metatarsal. It's the bone just in this part of the hand here.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Doc.
No problem. I know because I broke it smacking some guy on his jaw about 30 years ago. But
did he deserve it?
I tell you what, his jaw came off worse than my hand. But yeah, I mean that's not a nice injury. You generally do have to have surgery. I had surgery, so I do know what that's like. What I find amazing is he actually played the whole game with it. So he's out.
Hats off, Elijah.
Yeah.
Well done. So take a week. Well, no, I think probably longer. He's having surgery, so
no, he'll be back. He'll be 1 week. That's it. It's
right.
pretty simple.
Right.
He'll have his hand heavily strapped, but he should be back. But I think there's a bye coming after. So I think he has a couple. I'm not sure of it exactly.
Right. Yeah, that might be it. That's why. So let's talk about who could potentially be coming in, I assume, apart from
Perkins.
Ridley.
Before we talk, Perkins went out with some quad injury, didn't he?
Yes.
So we'll be a 3-goal better team this week.
Yeah. All right, so who's coming in?
Yeah, so interestingly, Ridley should be back.
Sure.
Team hasn't been announced at the time of recording, but I would expect Ridley to come straight back in. It seems that he's recovered very well from his concussion, which is great news, particularly when we know that young Nick Cox is having such a difficult time with his concussion issues. So, yeah, but we've got to be careful with Jordan because this is his third concussion inside, I think, 3 years. So that's a worry, and hopefully he won't have any more problems with that.
Yeah, but I mean, Tom Liberatore's had a similar sort of thing, and I think he's sort of had to undergo brain scans, but they keeps coming up clear every time, which makes it sort of then hard to.
As far as I know, and if there's any medicos out there, a simple brain scan is not going to detect things like CTE.
Right.
Now, CTE is the long-term effect of multiple concussions and its form of brain damage. And one of the great problems is that they've not been able to really come up with a simple way of measuring that damage up until now. And I was interested to watch a report on the news recently about, I think it's in fact Australian or New Zealand scientists have come up with a way in which they can scan now to discover long-term CTE damage as a consequence of multiple concussions. So,
Jeez.
but it is a real concern in our sport, and as it is in any contact sport. And I'm sure we're going to be hearing a lot more about it. But anyway, great news that Jordan Ridley. Oh, you didn't know I had that kind of medical.
No, I didn't.
Right, it's metatarsals. People don't realise.
Really, that's a whole other episode.
It is.
You could run there. Okay, so who then will be coming?
So Ridley and I think obviously we've got two players definitely going out. So we assume that one of them coming in will be Ridley, but the other one, of course, is the great news that Saad El-Hawley will be making his debut. So that is
great news. That is very exciting. He's a recruit from the Bull Ants last year, mid-season recruit, wasn't he?
He was.
So it'll be very interesting to see what he can do.
Yeah, look, I'm excited to see this young man playing football. He looks like a classy player. He's got a lot of skills. Stepping up from a VFL level to, frankly speaking, Coburg. Is it Coburg Bull Ants or
Northern Bull Ants,
or Northern Bull Ants, whatever. Yeah, I mean to do that and to play in the AFL is a big jump. He's
a pretty good kick. Let's hope it stays that way.
Right. Well, if he's a pretty good kick, he'll probably wind up at Hawthorn. But no, seriously. We all know about that. But I'm looking forward to seeing him play. He does look like a really silky player with a bit of grit. Yeah. And, I'm sure he'll add some real spice to the lineup. And best of luck to him. And I'm sure his family are incredibly proud of him. What an achievement to find himself suddenly running out with the Essendon Bombers.
Yes.
Yeah, they're probably just a little bit better than the Bull Ants right now. So maybe not. Maybe
marginally. Okay, so I'm thinking Setterfield. Could he come in? Because I like the thought of that. Don't know why, but I like it.
Well, I'm going to say that El-Hawley coming in could be Dylan Shield going out. If Brad, I think we said in last week's episode of the post-match review, if Dylan Shield lines up on the half-back flank for the Bombers this week, you'll know that Brad Scott's being deliberately stubborn.
I wouldn't be so certain.
Right.
But anyway.
But, look, Setterfield could be a good natural replacement for Sartis. He's that inside kind of midfielder.
Yeah.
So, let's see how we go.
Okay, so Port Adelaide are also, they're missing a few players as well. Butters is still out. McEntee, Jones.
Who?
Lacocious. And the great BZT. Doesn't get too front up against his old side.
That's a shame. That is a real shame. And I think, is Radaglia on the sidelines?
Yeah, I think he's a potential in.
Potential in, okay.
Mason is a maybe.
Yeah.
And they've got some debutante as well. I think.
Cochrane. Cochrane.
Coming in as well.
Johnny Cochrane.
They've got their issues as well. However, they still go in as very strong favourites.
As they should.
I think they're at $1.60. We're at $2.30.
Now, how many games in a row have they beaten us?
8.
8, is it?
8. So, I think it goes back to 2018. And they don't mind playing at Marvel. So
have we got a winning streak like that against any team?
No, we got.
What about against the Eagles? Have we won?
No, I don't.
Oh no, because they beat us over there a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I don't think we do. So last week we helped Adelaide break their hoodoo at the MCG. Will Port help us break the hoodoo that exists with them over us at the moment? All right, so do we need to say any more than that?
No, I mean, Port are going to win this game, but... And do you have some odds on this game? I thought
I said.
Oh, you've got
they're
$1.60.
$1.60.
Right, actually, I thought they'd be a little shorter than $1.60.
Yeah.
Some people really don't understand the game, but anyway, I think Port will win the game. They'll probably win it, pretty well. Don't care. Honestly, I don't know about you, but I don't care what the result is. I just want to see a response. So if we go down by 30 points, but we played our guts out, fantastic. I'll take that. I think we'll take that. Wouldn't you?
Yeah, I suppose I would. But, I just want to see a bit more cohesion. That's all I want to see this week between the side. It worried me last week, the lack of cohesion. These were not guys that were playing for each other.
Will you get cohesion?
Not from what I could see.
I don't know. Cohesion comes with time. I think cohesion comes with practice, with game plan, with skills. I don't think we've got that. I think we can only hope for effort. Honestly, if we're suddenly stringing together chains of foot passes that are hitting the target we couldn't do it last week. I mean, what's going on? How can we suddenly flip to that in 1 week? I think cohesion might be a long shot, to be honest. I agree. I'd love to see it. But
Yeah, no, I disagree. Disagree. There were so many players out of position last week. We talked about Adelaide going forward inside 50, having not just one option, 3 very open options. That only happens when there's just no love for each other, no trying to protect the guy beside you. That seemed to be lacking. They just... It seemed to be missing. So that's
all right. Well, you're hoping for cohesion. I'm hoping for effort. If we get both of them, we'll probably win the game.
I'd love to think that the Bombers could, put on an effort, fall over the line.
You're going to make a tip?
I'm not going to say that.
Why not?
Yeah, because I'm just not going to.
Oh, no one cares. No one's going to come for you.
No, they do, actually.
Oh, they go, oh, geez, guys, those tips didn't age well.
That's not respectful to our audience.
No. They're very quick. They're very quick. But, yes, we were very wrong about the Adelaide
No, we got
results.
that big wrong. I'm going to go for the Power to win by at least 24, maybe up to 30 points.
Oh, really?
But, again, with a much improved performance from the Bombers. Now, before we wrap up...
Dons to win with a goal after the siren.
Oh, just one last piece of news. Oh, what did you say? By a goal?
Yeah.
You said the Bombers are going to win?
After the siren.
Oh, you're an idiot.
Okay. All right.
Okay, well, we can see who's on the wacky tobacco here. Now, just one last piece of news, which is good news, I think, is Nate Caddy is apparently being offered an extension on his contract. I can hear some groans. I can hear people saying, oh, here we go, another early contract extension.
I'm groaning a little on the inside.
I'm extremely happy. This boy will become a player. I am convinced of that.
Is he being overhyped?
No, he's not. He's an 18, 19-year-old kid. He's got a long way to go.
Okay, so then why don't we just exercise some patience?
Because someone else will come for him. He's got 1 year to go at the end of this year. I think he's on a mandatory 3-year contract as a first-round draft pick. He's going to be a player, and everyone knows that. He hasn't had that breakout game yet, but when it comes and when he clicks and builds up a bit of body strength, he is going to be the real deal.
Look,
don't doubt it.
If other clubs look at the Essendon system, the development side of the club, and just go, geez, they don't know what to do with players. We'll sort it out. Then yes, I would agree with that.
That's probably what they're thinking.
Okay.
That's probably what they're thinking. So I think it's good that we're locking him in. Let's build a football team around the likes of Caddy, Isaac Kako, and Durham and Caldwell. I think we've got a lot of good young players, mid-age players in the side, but we're still a work in progress, obviously. So that's it. I just before we wrap up, I just want to send a little shout out to Luke. Luke, the drone pilot that we ran into before coming into the studio today. Luke famously suggested in a episode, it must be at least a year ago, that you and I look like Colonel Sanders and Alfred E. Newman from Mad magazine.
Yes.
And that was in the comment section. And so we took that to heart and actually made the thumbnail for our next video, Alfred E. Newman and Colonel Sanders. So, Luke, it was great to meet you. No hard feelings.
No. I think he was a little coy about that.
He was.
But, excellent to meet you, Luke. And also, can I shout out to another gentleman who I ran into this morning, dropping off my son at school, James, at the BP service station there. He pulled me up, James, also, very long time supporter, going back to the very early, back to the Windy Hill days. Yeah. And also a fan of the show. Thank you very much. Yeah. Very nice to meet you, James. If you happen to see us out and about, feel free to come over and say hello.
Don't feel free.
Okay,
we're good. We're good. Just know we're good. And no more selfies. Okay.
Let's leave it at that.
Thank you, guys.
Stick a fork in it. We are done.
We are, and we will look forward to catching up with you after the Port Adelaide game, hopefully with some better news this week. But keep watching, keep subscribing. We love your company. Thanks for all the comments.
Yes.
It's been a fun ride, and let's hope it only gets funner.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Please.
See you soon.
Like and subscribe. Please.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye for now. Bye.